Hello and welcome to the 1895 podcast with me, Thomas D.
And me, once again, Rob Cockerell.
And Rob, this is going to be an important episode, I think, covering one of the key gases. It's one that we haven't spent a huge focus on,
thankfully,
in particular, this topic. Of course, that topic is CO2. It's one that we've been saying. It's been quite a nice change to not be covering this, but it is once again returning to the news and could perhaps be in there even more so in the coming weeks, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's that time of year, isn't it? This is when we'd expect these things to start to make the headlines. Yeah, I mean, I've said thankfully we haven't been covering it. It's one of our favourite gases and topics. There's so much to get into when it comes to the CO2 business, the industry, the whole market. But we say thankfully because that means there haven't been any major shortages and no major disruption to industry and of course hospitality with food and beverages. So good news on that front. It has been relatively quiet, hasn't it, for a couple of years now in the CO2 market.
I sense a but coming.
Yeah, there's always a but, isn't it? It's a bit like with helium. You just never know how far away that ... is. I think we're hearing, aren't we, that things are tightening up on the UK side, and we must be clear there, we are talking about the UK. In the US, my understanding is things are calm at the moment. There are some potential speed bumps, but actually they're being averted as things stand. In Europe, again, we've got to clarify here, we're talking mostly around the UK position, and we have been told in recent days and weeks at Gasworld that there are just some little warning flags, we should say.
And this, like you say, this is normal around this time of year. We can almost come to expect it, but that shouldn't be the case, should it? Because this is a conversation we've been having now for several years about the need to diversify and the need to move away from such a fragile supply chain, but that's just doesn't seem to be happening maybe as quickly as we need it to.
No, I think there's always the danger of that. I've said many times it's a byproduct. It's at the mercy of its feedstocks. So you're always going to have those problems. Usually when there's some rumbles in the fertilizer business or the bioethanol markets, for example, you're going to see those knock-on effects with carbon dioxide supply. We're working on a piece at the moment at Gasworld, which hopefully will be published in the coming days or weeks. It's been calm, as we said. Is that by design? Is that because of some of the lessons learned and the actions implemented? Or is it rather by a happy accident and we just haven't had any of those major disruptions to hit the industry yet? That's what we're trying to explore at the moment. I think that's probably the bigger question really at the moment. I'd like to think since that great CO2 shortage of 2018, that we've learned all those lessons and things have been put in place to overcome that. But I think it's more I'd like to say that.
So what do we know so far with these whispers that are coming out of the industry and, you know, the conversations we're having on the ground that our journalists are having with those in the industry? What do we know so far?
Well, this is where we're trying to do a lot of digging at the moment to corroborate sources. Quite often you'll be told by the bigger players that there's nothing to see here. This is, things are fine. It's when you speak to people on the ground that they will tell you, actually, yeah, things are tight. It's very difficult at the moment. And what we believe we can trace this back to is, yes, that seasonality factor. Summer shortages are a familiar pattern in the CO2 business. That demand typically spikes in the food and beverage industry, and it's just at the same time as ammonia or bioethanol plants are scaling back or going down for maintenance, having already kind of hit their peak season. So we have that going on. We're being told that at least one UK plant is currently facing technical difficulties at the time of recording, and two major European CO2 producing plants are reportedly operating below capacity. It can often be hard to find the exact data on that or the kind of granularity of that, but that's what we're being told.
Sure. And you've been in this industry long enough, 25 years?
Not quite, Tom, 18.
No, 18 years close. So you've seen situations like this come and go many a time. So if you had to get your crystal ball out right now, what would you expect to come from this current situation and what we currently know?
Very much crystal ball gazing, Tom. At present, I don't feel like this is going to turn into a full-blown shortage. As I said, you've got these two sides of the market, almost two echo chambers that we have to listen to. One side is telling us there's no problem and things are okay. And I have to say, if we look back at the great CO2 shortages of summer 2018, they'd already hit by now. In fact, my youngest daughter was born on the day the big news broke, on the 18th of June, 2018. And the shortage was already in full swing. So look, we're recording this in early August, Tom, the first few days of the month, and there's no major shortage that's kind of developed or progressed yet. We're just hearing about tightening. So we've got to be sensible here. This isn't some sensationalist story. Tightness is in the market. We're hearing that with the boots on the ground, but it's not escalating yet. So my feeling is this might blow over without kind of downplaying it too much. Really cautious not to do that. But I don't know, we've been bitten before. We've seen September 2021, I believe.
You cancelled Christmas once.
Allegedly. We saw a contraction there, and we saw the plants in the UK being propped up by the government funding temporarily. So we could be wrong, but my feeling is this won't take hold.
And there is a fantastic interview that our journalist Anthony Wright did with Simon Barker of ProGas's UK surrounding shortage and the, I suppose, dependency on the big producers and how we can move away from this. And that's well worth a read, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And that really is the bigger story here at the moment, at the time of recording. The bigger story is that dependency and how it's so readily exposed. I think that's the big narrative here.
And that will no doubt be a big talking point in our CO2 events coming up. First up in the US, in Denver, and then again in Europe next year.
Yeah, back in Rotterdam, yeah.
So that's the shortage or the prospect of a shortage covered off. But so much more going on alongside that, and a further discussion to be had around the security of supply, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. As we said, we often see those dependencies or vulnerabilities exposed in the CO2 supply chain. And it's a conversation we've been having for a long, long time now, pre-2018, certainly since then. It's always coming up at our European CO2 summit, isn't it? And we so often find ourselves talking about those alternative modes of supply, the carbon capture route, the kind of biogenic or bio CO2 route, and utilization versus storage, and is CCS taking invaluable CO2 off the market table? We're all about the U in CCUS. So yeah, it throws all of that back into the spotlight. As you said, we'll be doing that again in Rotterdam 2026, but we've got an interview that's putting that into the spotlight as well, haven't we?
We certainly do. And this is, once again, from our friend of the show, Stephen Harrison, who spoke with the CEO of the Port of Rotterdam. And an important discussion for Steve to have there, and one that can be read on the gasworld website too, isn't it? It's just gone out.
Yep, just gone out, that one, with Boudewijn Siemons, the CEO of the Port of Rotterdam, as you said. Very topical interview as well. I mean, we had the Port of Rotterdam as a keynote at our CO2 summit in March, of course. Such is the strong link with decarbonisation in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, the port in particular, and that intersection with the CO2 business. So we had a keynote there, and now this interview really builds on that, covering so much ground here around, carbon capture and alternative energy pathways.
So, well, that's enough from us for the time being. I think let's listen to this interview, shall we?
This is Steve Harrison, and I'm speaking this morning with Boudewijn Siemons, who is the CEO of the Port of Rotterdam.
Good morning, Steve. Good to have this discussion together.
Fantastic. Boudewijn, before we get into all sorts of really interesting details about hydrogen and industrial gases operations on the port and things like that, I mean, there's so many different operating companies on the port, and they've got their own teams, their own assets, their own employees, their own ships. I'm sometimes asking myself, what do you in the Port of Rotterdam do, your team yourselves? What's exactly your role in holding the port together?
Yeah, I can talk about this for an hour, Steve. Won't go there. But actually, if you try and simplify it, analogy, see the port as an orchestra, and we try to be the conductor. We do not make the music. It's 3,000 companies that are active in the port, and we try to all bring it together into one symphony. And that means that that's why my job's so extremely interesting. We have to understand actually everything that goes on in the port, and not on an individual basis, but also how it works together and forms an ecosystem. And that means that we do not invest in processes that happen in the port. We invest in infrastructure that enables a port to be successful. And at the same time, we oversee supply chains. So we can actually link the dots, connect the dots where others might not be in the position to do so. And then in that way, we try to support businesses being successful and being able to transition in the Port of Rotterdam.
Fantastic. And listen, when I look at various different graphs of European ports, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, the whole western coast here, I mean, I still see that Rotterdam is basically, the whole of the rest of them all added together. What's been the secret of your really sustained success and continued growth over the last 50 years, please, Boudewijn?
Yeah, I think it's like the real estate market. If you ask somebody from real estate market what is the success factor, they say there's 3 success factors for real estate, and that's location, location, and location. And I think the same goes for ports. So a port has to be very accessible from sea, and it has to have very credible and non-congested hinterland connections. And then a port will actually the cargo chooses the port. It's not the other way around. So you have to have a number of attractive propositions to the cargo in order for the cargo to choose you as a port. In that sense, I think we're blessed to be at the end of the delta for Northwest Europe and have these strong hinterland connections. And everybody has road and rail, and we have very strong waterways also leading all the way up to Switzerland. And that doesn't mean that it's only the waterways, because also the strength comes from a good rail connection, good roads, and the fourth modality is also not unimportant, and that's pipelines. So you see that a lot of energy travels through pipelines to the hinterland. Crude oil arrives here by ship, 100 million tons annually, and under the ground, half of it actually goes to Flushing, to Antwerp, to North Rhine-Westphalia, to the Ruhr area, to feed refineries in the hinterland. The other half of the crude goes to the 4 large refineries in Rotterdam itself, and that's already just a little bit less than a quarter of the throughput that we do in this port. Rotterdam provides 13% of the energy for entire Europe that flows through this port.
And you've talked about refineries and energy there, and I'd love to come on to that a little bit. I mean, the gasworld readership, the HTVU readership, I'm sure they'd be very interested to hear about some of the industrial gases operators here and some of the refiners. A lot of hydrogen's being produced and some good plans to decarbonise that hydrogen production. I mean, that's going on within Air Liquide and within Air Products. But do you, as the port operator, take an interest in what the companies operating in here or the port are doing to decarbonise their operations?
Absolutely. We have, as a port, we have embraced the 2015 Paris Climate Treaty. We want to be zero emission or renewable, let's put it that way, climate neutral in 2050. And by 2030, we want to have minus 55%. Now, I'm not going to say we will make it. I'm also not going to say we're not going to make it, because things have been delaying, but things also have started in the port, and we take a huge interest. As an example, for instance, we are one of the 3 investors in the Portos project. This is a coffee machine for everybody on the other side of the. But we are one of the co-investors in the Portos project that will spike away 2.5 million tons of CO2 annually under the seabed, as from the second half of 2026. And the 4 launching customers actually are Shell, Exxon, Air Liquide, and Air Products. And by doing so, we'll be enabling the production of blue hydrogen. So absolutely, we take an interest, and we also our interest is so sizable that we also are willing to put our balance sheet to it and co-invest in operations like CCS.
Fantastic. And you've mentioned CCS, and you've also previously mentioned the pipeline infrastructure coming to and from the port. But of course, that large carbon capture facility will also mean a new CO2 pipeline running through the port. I mean, how does the port view changes like that? Okay, a big CO2 pipeline, well, that's new. I mean, what about the planning, the regulatory, the infrastructure, the health and safety? What do you have to consider?
All of the above. So we have to consider it all, and especially in the land line, that the collection line for the CO2 in the port, we're the co-investor, and we think we know our port. So it's kind of interesting that more than half of the energy transition will actually materialize underground. And already you can imagine a lot of cables and piping under the ground in the port. So shoeing in these kind of sizable CO2 pipelines was quite a challenge, but we managed to do so. And we have 5 horizontal directional drillings in the port, actually to get it from all the easterly part of the port, Pernis, all the way up to the most westerly part of the port, where the compressor station will be for the CCS operation. And so we're integral part of that. And I also think that it's important that we as port, because we know the port so well, actually govern this connecting infrastructure. And again, we will not invest in an ammonia terminal or an ammonia cracker or in a refinery or in a hydrogen production plant, an electrolyzer. We will not do that. That's for our customers. But again, the connecting infrastructure is something that we want to facilitate, again, to enable our customers to go through this transition as efficiently and as diligently as possible.
Fantastic. And you mentioned their ammonia terminal. I mean, I imagine there's also liquid CO2 terminals being planned here. Again, we can manage the CO2 through pipeline. Sometimes it's going to go away by ship, I'd imagine. But let's say new terminals for new products, liquid ammonia, liquid CO2, e-methanol or whatever. I mean, how do you see that kind of thing developing in the port, please, Boudewijn?
Yeah, we enabled LNG to land in the port. That has been more than 10 years ago, the gate terminal, and the same will happen with ammonia, with additional methanol, with liquid CO2. So there are companies in the port active in projecting plans and developing plans for a liquid CO2 terminal, so that not only the CO2 that goes into CCS systems will have to come in by pipeline, but that it can then also come in by ship, because there's going to be inland barges coming in with liquid CO2 from places in the hinterland that have too little emission actually to connect them to a pipeline, but still have to decarbonize, and for some decades it will have to go to CCS too. And also through the seaside, ships will come in with liquid CO2 with the same kind of operating model. And that will connect into not the Portos project that we're building now, because that's sold out, but the Aramis project is being developed, which will be the follow-up CCS project, and that has the potential of being nearly 10 times as large as Portos. So we aspire as Port of Rotterdam, and that's again where port strategy comes in, to be the CO2 hub of the future.
Fantastic. And if we talk about some of those products that we've just mentioned there, methanol or ammonia, not just as storage on the port in large terminals and large tanks, but actually as potential fuels for some of the ships coming in and out of the port. I mean, how do you see the development of bunkering and also the development of those, let's say, new, cleaner marine fuels on the port, please, Boudewijn?
Yeah, I think it's all going to happen. And to be honest, oil is and was a fantastic product because it has a high energy density, it's easy to transport, it doesn't degrade over time. So it's very hard to replace, and we have to replace it. We all know that. So already we bunker LNG as business as usual. Through the existing LNG infrastructure, you can also bunker LBM, liquid biomethane. And also that can be mandated in, so you don't have to go from one to the other, but you can, just like road fuels with B7 or E10, you can mandate it in, and the same is happening with aviation fuel and the mandates for sustainable aviation. The same will happen with LNG over time. We already bunker methanol as business as usual in the port. Well, it's not as usual, it doesn't happen that much, but it has been done, and we're commercially we as a port authority are facilitating the commercial bunker operation for methanol, and it's being done. So methanol ships actually bunker in the Port of Rotterdam. And a couple of weeks ago, we performed the world's first import ammonia ship-to-ship transfer operation, simulating an ammonia bunker operation, because also that will happen. The first ships on ammonia are on order. They'll enter the market by the end of 26, and by that time we have to be ready to perform bunker operations, because we're a world port, and a world port has to be able to bunker all the bunker fuels that ships need. We're not the ones making choices. It's the market that makes the choices, and we have to be able to facilitate it. And to do so, we've developed a maturity model that we share with other ports in the world that actually brings us from the PowerPoint and the Excel sheet, everything on paper, to actually being able to perform mature bunker operations, going concern in a safe way. And it's divided in 7 to 8 steps. And every step it's a gated process. You have to actually fulfill the entire phase before you can go into the next step. And it all has to do with regulations, technology, safety standards. And in the end, you can do it as a port. And that guides us through all these different alternative low-carbon bunker solutions. And also liquid hydrogen will, for instance, be one of the future fuels that we will be able to bunker.
Boudewijn, if you don't mind me saying, I think you've just touched on why I believe the Port of Rotterdam is relevant and has remained relevant and will remain leading for the next 10, 20, 30 years, because precisely of your willingness to change, to innovate, to keep up with the times, not just to do what you want to do, but to do what is right to serve the ships that want to come into this port. So for me, you've just answered question number one here, which was, why is the Port of Rotterdam ultimately so successful and has been so? Let me come on to something else here, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask for a personal crystal ball gazing opinion. If you had to pick one of those, let's say cleaner bunkering fuels for the future, whether it's green ammonia or e-methanol, something that could be hydrogen, something that could be genuinely sustainable, where would you say by, let's say, 2040, 2050, where do you think the end game is going to land?
That is so difficult, and people have been proven so wrong often in predicting the future. But it might be a bit of a not very brave answer. But I think it's all going to happen. I think ferries and short sea and ro-ro has the potential to become electric. And I think we should do electric, what can be done electric, especially in ports, because that's where wind farms at sea landfall, and all the energy that you consume in a port, electrical, doesn't have to go to the hinterland, and we already have net congestion. So ferries and everything, ro-ros becoming electrical sounds logical, short distance. Then I think we're going to go to, for the short sea, I think we're going to go to forms of hydrogen. So you see already Samskip, for instance, investing in hydrogen short sea ships, and I think that there's merit to that solution. I think ammonia, because it will be transported over the world, and then actually fueling your ship on the product that you transport. I mean, LNG ships do so I think ammonia ships will do so too. And I think that the first ships are in order. There's toxic proportions to characteristics to ammonia. So let's see how influential that will be. In the end, I'm not sure. I don't rule it out, but I'm not going to put all my money on it. Methanol viable, but I do think that methanol has the potential also as a feedstock for eSAF. And also the airplanes being hard to abate. Methanol might move a little bit more towards airplanes, air cargo than towards ships. And I think something that we are starting to talk about, and which would have a lot of merits for long-distance container hauls with large ships, the 24,000 plus TEU ships. I think nuclear by 2040, 2050 is a serious possibility, because we're developing all these small modular reactors, land-based, with also molten salt variations, which have a much lower risk profile and actually are being developed in the range from 50 to 500 megawatts. And at the lower end of that range, marinizing those kind of solutions, making sure that the risk profile stays within the dimensions of the ship, actually makes it a very viable option. I mean, it wouldn't mean any more bunker operations in our port, but I think it's a very viable option for long haul. And that's also because the other options, the other solutions, all have lower energy density than oil. So if you want to secure a certain range, then also nuclear becomes viable. And I think the nuclear price will go down with the modularization of the solutions, land-based, and then marinizing.
That's really, really fascinating. Thank you for bringing those additional options into the discussion there. You mentioned there, of course, nuclear comes with some degree of risk which needs to be mitigated on board. And you mentioned there the toxicity profile of ammonia as well, which is very much an open question, especially for the maritime Siemens unions, not just the shipping operators, but also the people on board. I mean, as you as a port operator, I mean, thinking about ships coming, they can stay out in the far western ends of the port, they can come right into the city, or the ammonia storage facilities can again be out on the newer parts of the port out west, the reclaimed land, or come into the city. I mean, how do you profile a product such as ammonia and say, well, listen, we don't want it in the city centre, but you'd be quite welcome to have it out on the edge of the port? I mean, how do you profile some of those more toxic products and, let's say, manage the safety issues around them, please, Boudewijn?
Yeah. Well, in the end, it's the authorities that have to rule on what can happen where and what not. It sounds kind of logical that with ammonia operations that you try to stay as westerly as possible in the port, but it's not that no people live on the west end. So in the end, it has to be safe. And it's not that if you go to the west that you can adhere to lower safety standards. So it has to be safe. And that's also what we proved with our first ship-to-ship transfer with ammonia. We had zero breach of confinement for the product. And that's the way it has to be. And I come from the petrochemical industry, I've worked with ammonia, and I'm absolutely sure it can be done safely. But safety has three dimensions. That's mindware, software, hardware. So you have to have the right safety culture, you have to have the right safety procedures, and you have to have the right safety infrastructure technology. And all three are important. If one is missing, then you run a too high risk. So I think we have to be very diligent, and we can do what we do as a port by the grace of the surrounding communities, and they deserve a safe operation. Wherever it is, whether it's in the east or the west, whether it's a lot of people or less people, people shouldn't get hurt because of what happens in a port.
That's the best possible answer I could have expected. In fact, significantly better than I'd actually expected. That's very, very much, let's say, looking after the community, the citizens, and your local stakeholders. That's absolutely amazing. I mean, I mentioned a moment ago the port extension out west. I think I'm going to say this wrong, but the Maasvlakte or something like this. Thank you very much indeed. Is there any option? I mean, I don't know, 5-10 years now, port congestion, that you could do the similar on the northern side of the River Maas, or that you could go even further out? I mean, if somebody says we need a bigger port of Rotterdam, what would you do?
We'd go all the way to England. No, I don't see a lot of optionality on the north side. We are studying what would happen if we would expand more westerly. And what I just said on renewable energy, it all needs more space. So with the lower energy density of all the alternatives for oil, you're going to simply need more space. If you look at the other part of trying to become renewable in the port, that's the industry, and that has to become circular. And circular actually means that what's now a linear process of oil being transferred into plastics being burnt, and then more oil gets formed into plastics. You want the shampoo bottle actually to get back to oil again. And that requires more logistics, it requires more treatment. So also circularity requires more space than a linear industry, which we're in now. And the core of the process, the production doesn't change. It's the feedstock that has to change. So also there we need more room. So due to the energy transition, we actually might need more room because there's some industries that will disappear in the port, like a crude oil tank farm. I mean, I hope that 50 years from now we don't need it anymore, and we probably will need some, but less at least. So the room will become available. But all this industry, we should repurpose it into something renewable and reuse it. Also, that is circularity. So we will probably need more space, and for that reason, we're now in a early study phase what a westerly expansion for the port could look like. And we're doing that study together with local and national governmental organizations.
Fantastic, Boudewijn. It's been the most incredible pleasure talking to you. Incredibly insightful. I've learned so much indeed. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
And that was Boudewijn Siemons there. And of course, thanks again to Stephen Harrison of SBH4 Consulting. Fantastic interview there, wasn't it?
Yeah, some great comments there. I particularly like the line, Boudewijn says, I see the port as an orchestra and we try to be the conductor. The Port of Rotterdam it's huge. It's a huge entity and point of infrastructure. And I love the humility there of saying, look, we just provide that infrastructure and that location. It's about all the actors and stakeholders, but also great to hear about the port has such longevity because it is so ready and future-proof for all those different energies, the different pathways. We heard about ammonia there, we heard about hydrogen, we heard about methanol or e-methanol, and of course, very relevant to the topic at the start of this episode, CO2 and carbon capture.
Fantastic. We've really gone full circle on this episode, haven't we?
We have.
And hopefully we won't be covering off any CO2 shortages in the coming weeks, either.
We hope we won't be doing any emergency episodes. I need to go on a holiday, Tom. I think you do too. So it'd be nice if we weren't dragged back to the studio.
Yeah, let's make sure they don't happen in those couple of weeks at least. But we will still be releasing episodes even while we're away. We'll get a few in the can, won't we, to make sure that our listeners aren't left short on the 1895 content.
Absolutely, plenty of material out there. And of course, while we are away from the studio, Tom, everyone can keep track of things at gasworld.com.
They certainly can. And in the meantime, do like, follow and share the 1895 podcast. And we'll be back again next time.